At 1 a.m., the weather outside was tumultuous, with flashes of lightning illuminating the dark sky. Inside the MDM Supreme Apartments, a woman visibly exhausted from her work stepped into the elevator. She turned to her colleague, Ralph, and remarked, "Can you believe it's the weekend already?" Ralph, in a teasing tone, replied, "I was under the impression that editors-in-chief didn't have to work overtime, Miss Rossetti." She sighed heavily, replying, "You'd think so, but with all the bad news lately, it seems never-ending. Heat waves, rainstorms, it's all happening at once." As the elevator doors opened, Ralph stepped out, joking, "The Engineering Academy could use someone with your dedication to overtime. I could put in a recommendation for you." She waved him off, offering a weary smile. "Please, no more jokes. Good night, Ralph." As Miss Rossetti made her way toward her apartment, the weight of exhaustion settled in, her head pounding as if ready to burst. What on earth is happening to the world? She mused silently, but quickly dismissed the thought, focusing instead on the next headline she needed to prepare. Upon entering her apartment, her children ran to greet her. Surprised, she glanced at the clock. "It's 1 a.m., why are you both still awake?" Her youngest pointed toward the living room. "Big sister said it's dangerous here. She told us we need to evacuate." Confused, Miss Rossetti turned her attention to the television. To her surprise, a woman was speaking urgently. "This is a message from the Pan-Humanism Protection Association. Miss Rossetti, please evacuate yourself and your children from MDM apartments immediately. This is not a notification, it's a direct warning." Miss Rossetti's initial reaction was anger. "A hacker? Get off my TV!" she shouted. "How dare you invade my home?" The woman on the screen remained composed and resolute. "I assure you this is no prank. The Pan-Humanism Protection Association has identified that MDM apartments will be struck by a catastrophic thunderstorm in approximately 25 minutes. You must evacuate immediately." Though beginning to feel apprehensive, Miss Rossetti still clung to disbelief. "I don't care how you hacked into my system, but what you're suggesting is impossible. This building has top-tier lightning rods and fire protection systems. There's no way a fire could break out here." The woman, who introduced herself as Ding Xiang, replied with a firm yet urgent tone. "Our predictions are never wrong, Miss Rossetti. You may choose to disregard this warning, but I have a duty to inform you of the impending danger. For your own safety and the safety of your children, please leave the premises immediately." Intrigued by how the intruder had infiltrated her television system, Miss Rossetti stood frozen in disbelief while her children, still under the impression that this was some elaborate game, watched with wide-eyed excitement. Just then, a knock came at the door. "Miss Rossetti, please open the door," a man called from the hallway. "Has your internet been acting up as well?" Miss Rossetti opened the door quickly. "What do you mean, acting up? Are you experiencing the same thing?" Before she could finish, the man gestured for her to look around. As she glanced down the hallway, it became evident that everyone in the building had received the same message, each addressed personally. Stunned, Miss Rossetti's mind raced. How did they manage this? Did they really warn everyone in the entire building? At that moment, an elderly man stormed out of his apartment, visibly frustrated. "I got the same warning. They're saying a fire will break out in 15 minutes, he bellowed. "This is absurd. I'm going to sue these television and phone companies into bankruptcy for this harassment." Miss Rossetti turned to Ralph and asked, "Aren't you an information engineer? What's your opinion on all this?" Ralph, looking concerned, replied, "This is beyond anything normal. You have no idea what we're dealing with. What kind of virus could take over every electronic device simultaneously? I suspect that woman isn't even human. She's likely an artificial intelligence, an extremely advanced one." He pointed at Miss Rossetti. "She's even calling out everyone's name." Just then, Ding Xian's voice came through Ralph's phone. "You're right, Ralph. Now, can everyone please evacuate? There are 13 minutes left." Without hesitation, Ralph rushed toward the exit. "Miss Rossetti, get your kids out of here. I'm leaving now." Miss Rossetti watched in disbelief. Do you really believe in such a ridiculous prediction? Ralph paused briefly and said, There's an old saying in Chinese, if something can go wrong, it eventually will. Don't risk your children's lives just to prove a point. Meanwhile, the elderly man, still furious, noticed others starting to take the warning seriously. Great! You're all going to follow that arrogant lunatic? Fine, go ahead and leave. But I'm staying put. I'm smashing my phone and cutting the power. Let's see how they keep harassing me after that. As more and more people began to leave the building, Miss Rossetti's young daughter tugged at her sleeve and asked, Are we going to leave too, Mommy? Miss Rossetti looked at her children, her mind racing with uncertainty. Around her, many residents were cautiously heading toward the exits, heeding Ding Xiang's warning. However, some dismissed the entire situation as a hoax, brushing it off as nothing more than a scam. Outside, in the pouring rain, those who had evacuated stood in frustration. She made us leave in such a panic, and now we're just standing in the rain. This has to be a prank. I'll report this to the building management. Miss Rossetti, still on edge, thought to herself, It's just a thunderstorm. There's no way lightning could be strong enough to set the whole building on fire. Could we have really been tricked by a hacker? But just as the countdown reached 0, an incredibly powerful lightning strike hit MDM apartments. The entire building was engulfed in flames. The people who had evacuated safely stood in shock, watching the disaster unfold before their eyes. Those who had ignored the warning were caught in the fire, some even falling from the burning building. They're still inside. They're burning alive, someone shouted. Call the fire department now. But another voice, trembling with fear, added, Why didn't anyone force them to evacuate? Miss Rossetti, standing frozen, watched the horrifying scene unfold. Her child clung to her side and asked, in a small voice, Mom, are we going to burn to death too? Shaken, Miss Rossetti realized the truth. It's all thanks to that hacker. She glanced down at her phone, now functioning normally. She's gone. She saved us and disappeared without a trace. But Miss Rossetti couldn't shake the thought. She did tell us where she came from. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Ding Xiang, monitoring the entire situation, apologized to Xin. I'm sorry, I was only able to convince 67% of the residents to evacuate. She hesitated, her curiosity getting the better of her. Xin, there's one thing I don't understand. Why would some people rather destroy their phones and ignore my warnings, even up until their final moments? If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more thrilling updates. Stay tuned for the next chapter as the story unfolds. See you next time.